Good morning, folks. It's July 4th, 2018. Welcome back to Walters Aircraft Works. Hope everybody had a safe and fun 4th of July. Hey, I thought I'd take a few minutes this morning just to bring you into another project. Actually, this project's been going on longer than our EV project, but it kind of got pushed back to the back side of the shop when we started the EV project, and now, well, I got a 19-year-old son that's just chomping at the bit to get going on this truck, and hey, that's really the reason why I started this project. No better way to teach kids the skills than to get them out here and get them hands-on, get them cutting, grinding, welding, and using their brain for something other than video gaming. All right, so this is a 1971 K5 Blazer. It's the Gen 1 Blazer. It's the years where obviously when you pull the fiberglass top off the top of it, it's a convertible from the windshield on back. I've always wanted one of these trucks. I found this one, well, it was an eBay find, and got a decent deal on it. I think it came out of Pampa, Texas. The body is in good shape. It had some damage, not a lot of rust. So the panels are getting changed for damage, not really rust. Frame, besides for the damage, is in good shape. Looks fairly rusty now because we've been cleaning it with a acid to get the rust off from it, and it's kind of surface rusted now, or flash rusted, so it looks rusty, but it's really in pretty decent shape rust wise. Damage wise, well, that's a whole different story. Like everything else, it's a learning process. So pulled the body off the frame and started trying to figure out ways on how to determine whether it's straight and how to straighten it. Just kind of had to figure it out as I went along. That's part of the reason why I'm doing this video. Figure if I can help somebody out down the road. Hey, it may be an example of what not to do, which is pretty typical to a lot of things that I do. But either way, it's probably going to be a learning experience. So what did we find with this frame, damage-wise? Let me set you up in the tripod here so I can point and talk about a few things, and I'll show you the damage, and then I'll show you how I'm proceeding on to fix the damage. Before we pulled the body off the frame, we knew there was some damage. We didn't know the extent of the damage and how far it went back, so it eventually became evident that we were going to have to pull the body off the frame. We were leaning that direction anyways, just because we had to change the bushings, or the rubber mounts between the body and the frame. They were, well, it's seen better days. So not only was the hardware fairly corroded, but the rubber was basically missing. So to get the body line straight, I mean, this is a frame-built truck, not a unibody construction. So the body holds its shape, and the door jambs and those body lines, those gaps, can change if the frame twists, or if these rubber bushings are not right. Those gaps can change. So to get the body work right, the frame needs to be straight, the bushings need to be in good shape, and then you can start changing body parts and lining up body lines and make it right. So we knew we had a problem with the frame. We could tell that from the part of the frame that was sticking out in front of the body, or the engine bay, and we knew we had these body isolators problems. So it just became evident that we needed to pull the body off. So Superlifter 1000 to the rescue again. We pulled the body off and then started cleaning up the frame, and the problems became clearer as we had the whole thing exposed and easy to look at. Now that we know that there's a problem, how do you get the frame straight again? And I don't really know. I mean, I'm feeling my way through this like I do most things out here in the shop, and this seemed to be the way to go. So I turned a couple of steel bushings on the lathe, drilled a small hole in the center of them just so I could draw a string across them, and I plan on doing the same over on the left side of the frame. And then we'll kind of see how things line up along the way, some key marks along the rails. I suspect that the truck got hit actually from the front left, right there, and got pushed over. So I think both rails are going to have to go to the left some more, is what I expect. Now, before I could draw the string on the left rail, I started to see some problems with the body mount. This is actually where the radiator support mounts on the front, which also mounts the front fenders. The front fenders mount to the radiator support. And I could see some damage here. And I figured I had to get that straightened out first before I could draw the string and then see what I needed to do about the damage that was in this area right in here. So let me get you over here closer to this front left rail and I'll show you the damage that was there, and we'll go from there back. All right, this is the front left frame rail, and right here where these 3 holes are, there's supposed to be 5 holes there, but it's where the forward hanger for the forward leaf spring, and it was, well, you can see that this is the piece that I cut out. Somebody had been in there and did a little bit of a cobble repair. I hate to poke fun at them because you never know what kind of circumstances they were under when they were doing this repair. Maybe this is an old farm truck and this is what you do. You get the arc welder out and you put a little booger on it and throw a little bit of angle iron in there and weld it the best you can with the bumper still in place, the fender is still in place, and hey, I understand that's life. That's just the way things go. Who knew this truck eventually would be somebody's pet project and hopefully a family heirloom. But that's the way it was repaired, and I didn't like it, so I cut it out of there, welded in a new piece, and I'll re-drill those holes. And I think I'm going to bolt this forward hanger back in. Back in the 70s, this is the way they did it. They did, I would guess these are probably hot squeezed rivets. I don't know that for sure. Maybe they're cold squeezed, but I can tell you, well, I can show you a few other examples on this frame where I think union labor, maybe this is a Monday truck or a Friday truck, I'm not sure, but boy, there's some rough riveting work. A guy that like me, that comes from aviation, that has done a lot of rivets in his life, a lot of these would not pass muster. But hey, we'll fix them if we need to. If not, and they've lasted a few years anyways, they'll probably last a few more. But back to the hanger. Here it is. I've had it off. I've cleaned it up a little bit, run it through the bead blaster, and I got most of the grime off from it. You can see these rivets are even loose, so I'll either replace those or squish them some more, so kind of tighten that up. And then I'll have to drill the other 2 bottom holes. This thing was pretty beat too, to be honest with you. It actually has some cracks here that I'll need to take care of. You can see them on the inside as well. So something hit this truck fairly hard in this front left side. Well, that brings us back to having to get this part of it straightened out so I can put my other turn piece into this bracket. It needs to be mounted on the frame right so we can have a good starting point. We'll draw the string tight on this side and then start looking at how to fix the rest of the damage. And let me swing you around and I'll show you where else we found the frame damage. All right, we're over here on the right side of the frame and looking at the inside of the left frame rail. That's the front left wheel that you're seeing in the screen there. And the bar that's in there, the stainless steel bar that's going through there, it didn't used to go straight through like that. I'll put some screenshots in. I took some stills when I first took the rear shackle off the leaf spring and tried to slide, or I did slide a rod through this hanger, frame hanger here, and it shot off probably 10 degrees off, into space is where it was headed. This frame rail was twisted pretty bad. It was more evident back here on the back hanger than it was on the front hanger. But you can see there's still a little bit of rippling going on right here, and you can definitely see it on the bottom side of it. And the front up here is kinked pretty bad, and even the web. I'll swing you around so you can look at that, because that's the most obvious damage, is right here on the web. Just happens to be there's two holes in the web there, one where the brake line comes through, and the other one, I don't know if it's an extra hole or a tooling hole, but there's a crack between those holes, and it's kinked pretty bad. So it's going to take some good repair up there, or some straightening and then some repair. I would be really concerned about the strength of this frame if we just straightened it. Now, so far the straightening that I've done with the frame has been cold straightening. I haven't used any heat to speak of. I did use a little bit of heat on that forward hanger, but the frame itself, I haven't used any heat yet. Now, I don't know if that's good or bad. I think heat's going to get involved in it at some point, because there's too many kinks that need to be worked out. I don't think it's going to be able to be cold worked. Aluminum's more my expertise than steel, but I'm not overly concerned about it, because I plan on boxing this frame. This 4BT that goes in this truck is significantly more heavy than the 350 that came out of it. I got those numbers written down someplace, don't know them right off the top of my head, but it's quite a bit more. There's quite a bit more weight to the 4BT than there is to a Chevy 350. So I'm going to box this frame for the weight reason, plus I feel like this frame needs to be strengthened due to the damage that it's had on it. So I think with boxing it, it's going to give us more support than we will ever need. Besides for the fact that I'm not crushing rocks with this thing, or climbing rocks, or heavy off-road use, so I don't think I'm going to ride it that hard. But anyways, box frame, and might add a doubler back behind on the web where it's cracked up here, and I think that's going to give it plenty of support. But as you can see, with the stainless rod that's going through here now, I've got it pretty close to being true. That rod spins fairly free. There's a little bit of tension on this bracket right here, which means it's not perfect, and I'll keep working on it as I work these kinks out up here, and a little bit more of this back here. I think I can get it a little bit better. Now, it was the same on the front. You can see just a little bit of piece of it there. I got a fiberglass rod going through up there. The front hanger was cocked off to an angle as well, and I've got it pretty close. Well, the leaf spring sitting there is close, and when I put the hanger back on, hopefully it'll line up. If not, I'll have to do some more tweaking up there as well. All right, what else? Oh, I was going to show you an example of some shoddy 1971 rivet work. It's right here on this forward shock mount. Well, there it is. As you can see, that shock mount is not riveted real tightly to the frame, and if you look at the back side, what we call the shop end in the aviation world, it's what we call horse hoofed, kind of leaned over to the side, and yeah, I guess that was good enough, because this lasted quite a few years, but I don't know if I can stand to look at it. I'm going to probably have to fix that one and maybe a couple other ones, and just to tighten it up. All right, I don't plan on making a real extensive video series on this in this Blazer project. There's plenty of stuff out there on YouTube that covers body work and the mechanical stuff this might be a little bit of a different project because it's a conversion to a 4BT. There is some of that out there on YouTube as well. Throw some comments in there if you want more videos, more extensive, then I'll do them if there's enough demand for it. But if not, then I'll just probably throw something together here and there and keep you in the loop. It does slow the project down quite a bit to have to stop and film and think about what to film and what not to, and of course the editing and all that stuff, it takes some time. But if there's enough interest out there, I'll be glad to do it. Hey, the EV stuff back here, I get the batteries still on the bench and monitoring them. I've labeled them all with the voltages on them, and I'm going to check them periodically. Added a dry erase board here. I'm planning on laying out the basically the wiring schematic on the dry erase board so we can all kind of visualize how this thing's going to be wired together and where we have to put the components in a schematic form. I haven't seen a lot of that. There is a couple of videos out there, but they're pretty quick and short, and I'm going to try to add some detail to that. What else we've got going on? Well, I got another piece of equipment in, a bead roller. I got the sheet metal in for forming the boxes, and we'll start on that fairly soon. As soon as we can get this Blazer out of the shop, we'll get back to creating our boxes for our batteries and talk about the wiring on the dry erase board. I've been doing a lot of research looking at BMS systems and charging systems, and also the components that are going to have to connect all that together, the relays, the fuses, all that stuff. You know, hey, maybe some people come by that naturally, the electrical side of it. It does not come naturally for me. I have to grind through every bit of it. So it's a lot of internet research, a lot of, talking on the phone or emailing and trying to put the information together. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish with these videos, with the EV project anyways, is to help explain some of that and help people along the way. Yeah, a little update on the framework here. Ben and I spent a good, hot, sweaty day out here in the shop. Got a lot done, as you can tell by the shape of the shop. It's quite a mess, but the framework progressed nicely. Spent a good bit of time creating some more points to draw strings on the body mounts, and some time measuring crisscross between the body mount positions, and it was quite a bit out of square, significantly. So we wound up putting this bar sticking out the right frame rail and pulling a log chain from the back of the frame to the front of the frame, and then using a come along to pull that chain and kind of twisting or pulling the frame over. Pushed it about I guess 2.5 inches or 2 inches or so to make up about 1/2 inch. And the spring back, of course, let it spring back some, but right here, these points on these body mounts with this string right here, prior to us straightening the frame, was over this direction about 1/2 inch. And once we applied the pressure to the frame right there, like I said, about 2.5 inches, once we let up on the come along, it would spring back, and it wound up being right on. So if you look at all those strings, everything lines up real nice. Coming clear up here to the front. Let's see. Yeah, I spent a lot of time on this front hanger here. Had it off, did a bunch of work on that frame rail, and wound up using some hot rivets. Made 4 of these rivets on the lathe, and then I would heat them up with a torch and get them red hot and drive them into the holes using my rivet gun. I'll put some still shots on the video to show that process. I could have put bolts in there, but I wanted to do that hot rivet process just to see what it was like. So that was kind of neat. Everything lines up good. The fiberglass rod goes straight through. This front hanger lines up well with the right hanger now. Did not do that before. It's all cattywampus before. And the same with the rear hanger. This one was awful. We talked about it earlier. I'll show you some screenshots, or we have, I put some screenshots in there, one of the two. but it would stick out there probably 10 degrees or so. So that's nice. Did wind up using some heat to straighten the frame. Good kink right there. Had to work out with some heat. And this spot here was awful as well. Had a very nasty kink right in there and a crack that came around the corner up through that hole. And somebody had already tried to weld it. Didn't straighten it out. They just welded the kink in there. So wound up cutting that out, at least grinding the weld off, and cutting the crack, grinding a deep groove in the crack, and welding it from the inside and outside, and then putting a little stiffener in there to kind of shore things back up. And remember, I said earlier, all this is going to get boxed in. Once we get the mounting right for the 4BT, we'll box all this in, so it's all going to get stiffened even more. It's amazing to me how flimsy these frames are when you start trying to straighten them and wiggling them around. There's a lot of flopping going on, so definitely think boxing this front channel in is going to be required. Let's see, we got a seal kit for the NP205 here. We're probably going to start it soon. Got the boy watching a couple of videos on how to reseal it and kind of inspect it. I don't plan on overhauling it. I'm not going to change the bearings in it unless it needs to, unless we get in there and find something we don't like. But typically they don't get a whole lot of use, so I expect just have to reseal it, and maybe that input bearing a lot of times will get kind of rough, so we'll take a look at that. But that's what we're doing today. Let's see, trying to clean things up in here, hook the springs back up, and check the alignment with the wheels. Draw some strings from the back tires to the front tires, make sure everything looks good there. Ben straightened out the shackles. One of them was actually bent on purpose. I think the one for that side over there, just the only way it would fit is if they bent the shackle hangers, and they were kind of zigzagged to make them fit. So he straightened those out. We may actually make some new ones of those. He cleaned them up a little bit too, and everything on this truck is stamped and cut really rough. So that's a pretty rough stamping right there, and most all of it was the same way. It's kind of hard to look at it with today's standards anyways. Yeah, so today will probably be cleanup day a little bit, and we might get into that NP205. We also started to take a look at this Dana 44 and what we're going to need to clean it up and to overhaul it, whether it's going to need new bearings. It's certainly going to need ball joints and seals and who knows what else. Well, this truck has never run since I've had it, so it's been sitting here. I've had it for several years, and I don't know how long it's set before that. So that's in the works as well. NP205 first, Dana 44, then we'll get to the GM 12 bolt back there after that. All right, another update on our frame straightening here. Thought when I finished the last bit of video that we were all trued up and ready to go here, but the more I looked at it, there was a couple things that I didn't like about it. Lines were nice and straight, going straight, back and forth, but on the left side here, the line coming across the top of the shock was, it was actually touching the top of the shock here. And on the other side, it was about a half an inch, where it is right now, about a half inch above the shock itself. So a little bit of a discrepancy there caused me to do some more measuring. And when the boy got back with me, we actually checked the wheelbase on it. We drew a tape measure from the aft axle to the front axle, and there was just exactly an inch difference between the dimension there. I had to go back and read the tape twice because I thought there's no way it's a full inch out, but it certainly was. So boy, that got the gears turning, and I started doing some more measuring, and I kind of use these back points, what I'll call station number 5 back here, as the starting point. I can tell there really hasn't been any damage to the back of the frame, so I figured this was a good starting point. These, the 6th position here has had a little bit of damage due to probably people hitting the bumper or whatever. But anyway, so I used these as kind of the datum point, the starting point, and started measuring to each body mount position from there. And everything tracked real true from here to here to here until I got to this point right here. And it was on this left rail that things went wrong. All right, so this dimension from here to here was good, the same as this side. And it also checked good with the holes in the body. And then when you go from here to here, that dimension was good. And then when we take this dimension here, it was a 1/2 inch off. And boy, that just ground things to a stop, because there really hasn't been any damage to the frame in here. So how in the heck did this position get a 1/2 inch off? And we looked and we looked and we looked and finally discovered this. Well, if you look at this pad, this dimension here, oops, from here to here, well, hold on, let me grab a tape and I'll show you. All right, so you really don't even need a tape measure, because you can look how far out of center that hole is. But let's take a measurement here, just real rough. That's 1.5 inches from the edge of that hole to the edge of the plate here. And let's go around and check the other side. All right, and you can visually see that there's a difference. So if we check this side, it's 1 inch. So there's a 1/2 inch difference from where they stamped the hole in that right hand pad compared to this hole. So disregard the markings here. This is before we discovered that, and I thought maybe that the brackets themselves were bent, and I thought we were going to have to try to tweak them back, but that turned out it wasn't the case. It was the hole itself that's stamped in the wrong spot. So I double checked that with the holes in the body, and sure enough, I'm sure since 1971 that hole has been in the wrong spot. Thank you, quality control, GM, whoever is responsible for that. It's just ugly. Anyways, we can get that fixed up. Finding that discrepancy didn't solve our problem with the wheelbase, but again, it's just collecting data and checking to find out where this frame is bent and messed up. We know that we had some damage here. We had significant damage right here and up here as well. So what I finally concluded was that somehow with this damage, put enough force on this left rail to kind of increase this arc right here, kind of like squeezing a banana on the ends, making it bow more, change the dimensions between the front axle and the rear axle. So how do I fix that? Well, here's how I've done it. I've cut the frame rail right here with my Ziz wheel and created just a slot, and I've forced this 2x4 in here, which is the exact length of the distance between the front axle and the rear axle. And by pushing that 2x4 in there and setting the wheelbase correctly, it's only opened up the bottom of that gap by about 3/16, maybe 1/4 of an inch. So compressing that rail enough to bow it up just slightly, didn't take a whole lot, changed the dimension of this wheelbase by 1 inch down here. That's pretty amazing to me. So the wheelbase is set now. The axles are nice and true. We'll fix that frame. Probably I'll wind up cutting more of it out so I can create a bigger patch to go in there. And then I'll put a doubler on the back side of it the same way I did the damage up here. And everything else is looking good now. So it brought this down to an equal dimension. The only other issue that I have is these dimensions here from station number 1, the radiator support, all the way back to station 6. There's still a discrepancy in that dimension. Everything else is good. So this point to this point, these are the right dimensions. Up to here, we talked about this one. I got to fix that hole. and then that'll be the right dimension. But still there's a discrepancy coming up to station number 1, and it's about 3/8 of an inch, and I can't figure that one out either. It may have more to do with this hump being kind of scrunched up. It did fix it some by cutting that slit in there and lowering it, but not 100%. So I'll probably still mess with it some. I'd like to get it as close to perfect as I could. Be kind of nice if somebody had these dimensions, and I'll poke around on the internet some more to see if I can find what these station marks, that's what we'd call them in the aircraft world, is station marks. Maybe somebody that does a lot of framework or has done a lot of framework would have that, but I haven't found it on the internet yet, but I haven't really looked that hard either. So if I do, I'll post something on it, but that's where we stand now. Got another probably hot, sweaty day out here. All right, guys, I don't even remember what I said in my last video. I think this is about the third or fourth update here to the frame saga, and every time I finish a video, I think I'm done, and then I'll pull another string or take another measurement and find out there's something else I don't like. But I swear this is it. I'm done. So let me catch up on, well, I say caught up. This might be a lot repetitive just because I can't remember. It's been a few days since I shot the last video. I wound up pulling another string down the center line here. I found a schematic, not really a schematic, but a drawing on the internet somebody named Ron had posted for somebody else, and it had a few dimensions. I'll throw a screenshot of that in this video so you can see what I'm talking about, but it referenced a lot of centerline stuff, so that made sense to me that I needed to pull a string along the center line here, and it was very helpful. So while I was looking at doing that, I noticed that this piece back here had a curve to it, had a bend in it, and I thought it was factory. I thought it was the way it was stamped. As I looked at the drawing, as I started to really study it, I realized it was not supposed to be bent. They had several holes along the top here, and the one right in the center was squeezed oval shape, and then I could see where it wasn't quite uniform. So I pulled it out. It was all bolted in. Excuse me, it was not. The bottom was riveted and the top was bolted in. So I drilled the rivets out, pulled it out, and I straightened it. I did a fairly good job of straightening it. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized I wanted it to be a little bit thicker material, because this is where the hitch is going to hook up to, I believe. I think that's how it got bent, was the original hook, or the original hitch was hooked to the bottom of it. And so obviously somebody pulled a little bit too hard on it and bent it. So I had this made up. It's at a 1/4 inch, quite a bit stouter, and it's installed. Gave me a great starting point for our centerline string. And then of course this was just measuring and drawing and scoring a line in it. And then up here, the front support, I measured several times and drilled a hole in it and pulled a string through there. So that gave us our center line, and then lots more measuring, not only from body mount to body mount, but crisscross. And then I started to get really confused when I was dealing with what I call station number 2. We talked about it earlier on in this video, and I can't explain this at all. These were just completely out of shape based on everything. When you start talking about the dimensions between here, this point and side to side, just were not even close. So we're talking about 7/8 of an inch out. I have no idea how the thing left the factory that way, but the only way I knew how to fix it, and believe me, I looked and I measured, figuring it had to be the frame warped and not these pads made wrong, but it was not. It was evident from the way the holes were stamped in the pads that they were not uniform, and the measurements were, like I said, way out. So I cut the material out of them, Ben and I did, and welded new material and drilled new holes where they were supposed to be. They're within a 1/16 of an inch now, and looking good. So everything is pretty darn close to where it ought to be. Sighting down the string lines, taking measurements from the center line over, going from mount to mount to mount, double checking with the dimensions that we have available from that drawing, as well as crawling underneath the truck and measuring from hole to hole on the truck. And I'll swing you over here to the dry erase board and show you what we put on the dry erase board here. All right, so using a combination of the drawing and actually crawling underneath the body and measuring, this is what we came up with. Station 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the black numbers or measurements are from straight off the frame, and the red is from crawling underneath the body and measuring the body, and then kind of comparing them to the drawing. And some of these have been corrected on the frame, and the drawing here has not been corrected. So for instance, station number 2 has not been corrected there on the dry erase board, but they're all really close now, well within my standard. So I think we're done with the frame straightening portion of it. Now we can move on to, we're gonna probably sandblast some, and then we're working towards mounting the engine, and we got to get the transmission in. Got a guy building the transmission now. So as soon as we get that in, we'll be able to weld that and put the NP205 back together. Tore it apart to clean it up and reseal it, and found well, a couple issues with it. One of the shifting forks had broken off, and this chunk had fallen down on this gear and knocked a good sized chunk out of the gear, and then didn't realize it until we got it apart. But that catastrophic event caused a crack in the case right here. So had to figure out the process of welding that, heating the case in the barbecue grill, and then welding it with some stainless wire in the MIG gun, and then heating it again, and then slowly letting it cool down. But the result is good. The case looks like it's in good shape. It's in a real kind of non-structural spot, and above the oil line, so it won't be submerged under this place where the crack was, will not be submerged under the oil. So I think we're in good shape there. Got the replacement gear, got the replacement shift fork. Just got to put the thing back together, and probably going to change some of the hardware, and waiting on a couple of seals for the adapter, for the GM adapter. So yeah, these seals right here. So as soon as we get those in, we'll have the MP205 back together, be able to mount that on the frame. We'll be able to mount the transmission and the engine, and then start working on the engine mount and boxing in the frame after that. And we'll bring you back in when we get to that point. For now, thanks for watching, and get out in your shop, get something done. Talk to you next time.